What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Just Hoop Talk. You're with Justin Henry, Will Thompson, and today's guest, we have sports psychologist Ashley Baskerville with us today, along with our player analyst, Cody Demps. Stay tuned. We're going to be talking a lot about personalities when it comes to sports, what the players are going through in the bubble, and also what makes the difference between a Michael Jordan and a LeBron mentality when it comes to leadership and on-the-court play. Stay tuned.
You are now tuned in to the next best thing. Justin Henry, Will Thompson.
Yeah,
Let's go.
y'all can talk that talk, but this is just hoop talk. Updates on the news, analysis who's who gon' win, who gon' lose. Is it true? Is it true? This is just hoop talk. This is just hoop talk. Ball.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Just Hoop Talk. And today we're going to be talking about the player's mindset. It's an intriguing topic, and a lot of times we talk about just the game itself, but there's a lot more when it comes to the game. And Ashley, thank you so much for coming on the show today with us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I want to definitely get in a little bit more into just your background and kind of talk about this player mentality thing, especially, you know, in the era of social media. And as we just saw a wonderful playoffs and final series in the bubble, what it takes to be, you know, on the court, what determines on-court success. So Ashley, talk to us a little bit about just how you even got into sports psychology.
So my interest with sports psychology actually started with my obsession with basketball growing up, particularly Kobe Bryant, and wondering, growing up as like a kid in Sacramento, as a Laker fan, like, man, why is this dude better than everybody else? And I really just like asked myself, like, why can he perform better under pressure than everybody else in the league right now? And so from there, I started reading, getting into psychology. When I went to college, got into a psychology program. So now I have my master's in sport and performance psychology.
Awesome. And Kobe, man, Kobe's an interesting dynamic. I think we need to touch on that a little bit too, and his impact on the players. But did you play basketball as well? Like, when you mentioned you love basketball and Kobe, but were you actually playing? Are you hooping on the court?
So I played in high school. I didn't play past high school. So just for a little bit.
Nice. And so you got into this field. Was it something that you knew, okay, I'm going to be passionate about this, I want to study this, or was there a certain instance where you were like, you know what, now this is the time I want to get into the field, or just a specific memory that you had that made you really interested in going a little bit further into that, making it a career?
So my senior year of high school, we had a sports psychology class. And so it was a class, probably 60% seniors on your second semester. And we pretty much watched sports movies and meditated for 2 hours a day. So it was a great class. We all loved it, especially as seniors. But I knew from then, like, man, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about things like burnout. I want to talk about what it takes to come back from an injury. And so when I went to college, I took psychology classes. My degree was in psychology, but I didn't realize it was its own career path until one day I took like a sport and culture class, and they mentioned that, hey, we have our sports psychology program, and I like instantly switched over. Anything where I can talk about sports all day and get paid, I'm all for that. So I've been doing that. I've been doing this for about 6 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dude, and I feel like it's a career path that once you get into it, obviously it takes a certain mindset to understand probably that the on the court, recovering from an injury. And it's not just, you know, I think it's easy to just talk about sports or just talk about medicine, but then combining the two and actually understanding like that there's a lot of functionality differences in there. What's kind of, you know, what's been something that you've seen, like an encore? Has there been like a major encore injury you've seen that really just kind of drove you like, man, I can only imagine what's going through that player or what's going through that moment? You know what I mean? Like, is there been a certain encore or just overall sports experience that you've seen like that?
I don't know if there's a specific. My problem is I can't really turn the sports psychology brain off. So when I'm watching games, I'm breaking it down. I'm like, oh man, the pressure's getting this one. I can predict when people are going to make or miss free throws based on the way that they're like fidgeting at the free throw line sometimes.
Wow.
And so that's constantly going through my head of like, nope. Or you can tell when people are hesitating from injuries. So I think for me, that's a problem. I can't just sit back and enjoy it anymore. I'm like constantly breaking it down, which is fine. It's part of the fun.
True.
I think like we do that, like Will and Cody. I know you guys, saying as college NBA players, like I know you guys probably see that too. What are your guys' thoughts on that? Because obviously there's a psychology thing, and I know just sitting back and watching sometimes it's easy to be like, oh, he's probably gonna miss the first one, but like knowing that there's the mentality to it, I want you guys to speak on that a little bit too.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think once you start understanding like a game at like different levels, that's the only way you'll look at a game. Like I remember back when I was a kid, I used to just enjoy like just watching them make baskets, but now I'm like trying to analyze. I'm looking at the plays. I got like the player mentality where I'm looking at the plays, I'm looking at the substitution patterns, all that type of stuff. So that makes sense for someone with like such a deep background into the sports psychology, just seeing that all the time. You can't really flip it on or off. You are always, kind of taints you as a fan almost.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about it is like the game is so competitive now, and there's so many people playing at like a really high level that there's just little things that make the difference between like being great or being just good, or being a college athlete or being a pro athlete. So I think it's going to become more prevalent. Like a lot of it is in your head, right? Like the things that make, the difference between being super successful and not as successful. So that's really cool to hear that.
Yeah, I think those guys that make that next level jump, I think that mentality part is where most of that maturity comes from, I think, rather than just the straight up skill. Because most guys, I feel like, have the skill, have the tools, but it's what is up there that kind of sets them apart for sure.
That actual mentality, right?
Yeah, actually, I'm really interested in how you ended up making this your career and kind of what path you took, because it's super interesting. It's kind of a newer career field, right? Like, I'm interested in seeing how you got into it and how you made it a career and how you ended up getting paid doing this.
So it's interesting because sports psychology is the fastest growing field in psychology, because people are starting to realize that even not just with athletes, what we call like a tactical athlete, so military, police officers, firefighters, they all need these skills too. Yeah. So I started my own practice, like I said, about 6 years ago. And so I picked up clients here and there from all different sports, all different fields, all different age groups. And then I also work full-time with the Army. So as a contractor for the Army, teaching them how to use the same skills, how to be confident when they have no idea what's about to happen on the other end, but now you're a leader and these soldiers have to follow you. And then, so working with both populations.
And so when you're working with, those different, say it's the Army, say it's the professional players or any sports player in general, like what are those conversations like that you're having? Is this something where you're helping to train mentality, or just helping people overcome maybe some instabilities that they have or insecurities that they have if it's coming over an injury, or maybe they've been playing for a bad stretch? Like what are those conversations like with your clients?
So starting off with, everybody's different. So everyone's reason for asking for help or coming to see me is going to be completely different. Some of it's, like I said, confidence. Some people don't know how to perform under pressure. Sometimes when I work with teenagers, it's their parents getting on their nerves and them trying to block them out during a game. And so, which is far more common. But it just reminding them, I think, that it's okay for what I do, especially, I'm not going to prescribe medication to anyone or anything like that. I know when I first got in the field, when I'm like, hey, yeah, I do sports psychology, and people's instant reply was like, I'm not crazy. And I never said you were. I just said you can shoot better or control your breath when you're running. Okay. But so getting over that initial stigma and connotation of like, this is someone in the psychology field, this is someone who's working with my brain here, and then meeting them where they are. Sometimes it's just, hey, you're not ready for me to be too hands-on, so I'm going to give you maybe some worksheets, or I'm going to put you through an imagery script or a meditation script. And so they can kind of start on their own, and then I meet them where they're at.
Oh, it's an interesting concept, especially with people with really dominant competitive personalities. So you're like, man, I don't got anything wrong with me. My head's fine. It's just, it's a shooting thing. You don't really want to attribute it to like something maybe a little bit not off, but like just, it's not centered, and right. I think it's tough for you to sometimes just fully admit that. And you see that, these guys on the professional level, they're really, it gets to the point where on the court, they're aggressive and it's probably a tough conversation for them to have and even realize, and especially when they log onto their phone right afterward and they're seeing all these comments about, man, this guy's head's in a bad spot, or he's playing like, he's playing bad, whatever it is. What's the impact you feel like these players are seeing right now from social media, whether it's positive or negative?
I think social media makes it hard. So they're constantly being attacked, constantly criticized, whether they had a good game or a bad game. People are going to come at them and criticize it. Usually for me, when I'm talking to athletes, I always bring up the Kobe's, the Michaels, the LeBrons, like Tom Brady. These are people who are constantly, their entire careers, under criticism, and they all see a sports psychologist. They all saw a sports psychologist on a regular basis. And so reminding them, even the best of the best, but when it comes to social media, the older I get and the more I get involved, I realize, like, when my college, all the athletes had to get off of social media during season, because it adds a level of like pressure and decreases confidence that people don't even think about. You're constantly taking in criticism, and some things it's like you can't change that. There's nothing you can do about it. You think about the Laker game with Danny Green, the fact that they're sending death threats to him and his wife or his fiance, like, that's crazy. But people have, like, fans have this weird mentality that they own athletes, so they think they can kind of speak to them however they want from behind a screen. And so that gets at players a lot more than they want to admit. And the ones that do seek help or reach out to people are usually not talking about it. So I've been really happy to see that more people are speaking on it, like Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving and Jimmy Butler saying, like, hey, I need to get my head right. So I went and got some help. Because you see that everyone thinks they got to handle it on their own, and they don't.
Those are, man, amazing points. And you see it, and like you said, it's being kind of integrated in the game today. Cody, what are your thoughts on that whole thing, man? Because I feel like there's a lot of truth in that, and there's a lot of probably athletes thinking the same thing.
Yeah, like she said, like when people log on to Twitter after a game, it'll be usually either super good or super bad stuff. People don't really like either say like, oh yeah, he had a good game. They're not gonna go out and tweet that out. Like, all the hot takes are the ones that are getting the most attention, so those are the ones you're most likely to see. So yeah, it's really hard trying to like tune in and trying to keep that inner confidence when you're getting say, oh, I had a great game right here, and then people are, oh man, get this guy off our team, like we don't need him, blah blah blah, when he has like his own life and like this is his job. So yeah, very interesting. I like how you also touched on the stigma of guys like Kevin Love speaking out more, saying it's okay to like need help, like it's all right.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. The mental concern, me and Will, we get our little mini comments down there, people bashing us, and it's like I can only imagine what that scale's like when you're playing in front of millions of people that have vested interests, whether it's a betting or it's their team or you're their player, and it's like people talk about you whether it's a missed shot or you get hurt. Like sometimes people are happy for you when you get like happy that you got hurt, and it's like, I think as an athlete, when you realize you're just a person too, I think the fans miss that aspect. Like you mentioned, a really good point. It's like the fans feel like they own you. You know what I mean? And to a certain degree, it kind of feels like that. You can kind of tell with like the NBA bubble. It's like they were stuck in that bubble, all eyes on them, whether it was the protests, whether it was their level of play. Talk about what your thoughts were on that entire bubble experience for those players. They're removed from their homes for 2 or 3 months, some of them. What were your thoughts on just the bubble and what it would take mentally, like some of the things that those guys went through?
So I think they handled the bubble the best that they could. So one thing that a lot of people didn't realize was within every team, so they were able to bring like 10 staff members or whatever. Most teams brought a sports psychologist with them. The bubble also had like a 24/7 hotline for all the athletes. And then they had some other mental coaches as well as sports psychologists in the bubble. So that was someone that they could reach out to anytime, any place, which I think was good because you have the pressure of just playing, right? You're making this time worth it. And we're in a pandemic and in the middle of the biggest social justice protests worldwide. Oh, and you're away from your family for like a quarter of the year, but you still have to perform because, well, you have to make money, right? You have to do your job. This is your livelihood. So it goes into the first thing I thought about was the psychology of like isolation. and basically the way that people will react when they're stuck by themselves. And like the players weren't completely isolated, but they're removed from the people that they typically spend their time with. Right. And or you're stuck with the people that you don't want to see all the time. And then you add on the layer of like, oh, hey, they just beat me, or they were in my butt the whole game, and now I got to go eat dinner with them. It's not me getting on a plane and going home. I'm going to see you constantly. Yeah. And I think that started to eat away at some players, and you really saw who the most mentally tough athletes were, because they were the ones that were still able to play consistently, to block out everything that was going on and focus on the game, which it's impressive because it's hard, especially with everything going on in the world right now.
Yeah, we talked about the Clippers. The Los Angeles Clippers were one of the teams that we talked about that kind of seemed like they were a little off. You know, we had players leaving the bubble. We had some, you know, Paul George actually came out and said, this is actually affecting me like mentally. So you can obviously tell that it was getting to some players. You mentioned getting the most out of those players, like some players that got the most out of it too. What does that do to somebody when you're in isolation mode? Like, obviously you have to be hyper focused on the task at hand. And for a lot of the period, they didn't have anybody there with them. No, you know, not the wives or the kids that were there that were allowed later. Like, what does that hyper focus do to somebody, either in a good way or a bad way? Like, so what are the types of on-court things that we can see?
So in a bad way, it's going to increase their anxiety. Like, there's so much going on that they don't have control over. So the athletes who are able to focus on, hey, this is the only thing I can control right now is how I play, were the ones that were going to show up and play best. The ones who were worried about everything happening outside of the game were the ones that you saw playing inconsistently. I think on the court, you can tell that, especially without fans, for a lot of people, I was saying towards the beginning of the games, you could see when people were really struggling. And I said, it's because they don't know how to get out of their own head. And it's because when the fans are there, that's something you can distract yourself with, the cheering, the boos, whatever. When it's silent, all you're hearing is what's going on in your head. And you're going to sit there and keep going over and ruminating over, oh man, I can't believe I missed that shot. I can't believe I missed that shot. So the athletes who are the most mentally tough are the ones that were able to like stop the inner dialogue and focus and be present. So you could see that, especially with athletes struggling a lot more towards the beginning of the bubble. And then as you got further down towards the end of the bubble. The Clippers, to me, towards the end of the playoffs, it looked like they were just ready to go home. Like they were done. I'm ready.
Yeah, I think that's really crazy point that having like someone booing could actually help you, could calm you, because that's something that you're used to, something you're used to hearing, and kind of get out of your own head, which is super interesting. That's the...
And then no fans part that you talked about too is really interesting, because it's just like, you know, outside of just the booing, it's like you hear your misses, you hear the other teams, and it's a different atmosphere than what you're used to. And I think that you saw like the players, I think that the players that really play at a high level, like Devin Booker came out, and it felt like that whole Suns team, they were young, and it didn't faze them at all. But then you notice some of those older teams, I think maybe they were accustomed to having those fans in there, like you mentioned, and you could just kind of see their level of play. And that's why you saw, the Heat, I don't know in a regular season that we see them in the NBA Finals. But I think because they're mentally, I think that team already was a mentally strong team, well coached. You saw them kind of elevate their level of play, you know, and we saw the results of that.
Yeah.
It's talking about different athletes on the court too. I think that we also saw that alpha, that hard nose with the Miami Heat, and we talk about that a lot with, you know, Michael Jordan and LeBron, of course. They're two way different types of personalities. Some people, we've had a lot of conversations recently about the GOAT. Will and I have been hashing that to death with LeBron here getting that recent championship. But you talk about the personalities a little bit between a Michael Jordan and a LeBron. And I want to start with like leadership, because I think that that's an important key on the court, especially, you know, going through a bubble or going through an entire season. How do players respond to that different type of leadership, in your opinion?
I think for LeBron and for MJ, leadership is the biggest difference between them. And it's Michael Jordan, he just wanted to win, right? Like he was going to do whatever it took to win. It came down, you better give him the ball and get out the way because it's his show. LeBron wants to be a good teammate. And so he actually like friends his teammates, which was something you didn't see out of Michael Jordan. And what that does though, right? What that does though is it builds trust. So LeBron's more likely to trust his teammates at the end of the game than Michael Jordan was. So he's more likely to pass because he has that confidence in his teammates that people like Michael Jordan or even like Kobe Bryant didn't really have. They were like, oh, nope, it's got to be on me. And I think that's where you see that difference in the debate when we're talking about mentality. Michael Jordan had this ability. He became like an assassin. Like, shut it on, like, turn it on and go. And LeBron's okay dishing and passing, giving somebody else a chance to shine. And so people see that as kind of like a weakness in LeBron. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Like I said, I'm a Kobe fan, so I'm used to the shut it off and just go. It's my time. But it works for him. That's how he leads, and that's how he leads a team. And so that's how that shows up differently, I think, for the most part, between the two of them.
Yeah, it's crazy because, you know, the teammates, I think, respond a different way than what we see fans. Fans, it's like they gravitate towards the personality that they identify with the most. But we see them, you know, and I don't know how that phases a player. Like obviously Jordan, it probably fuels more so a player like him when he hears feedback of like, oh, the negative. But when LeBron hears the negative, it seems like he plays a different way or he takes that energy a different way. I'm not sure if that's the case or not, but it seems like he responds a little bit differently to the criticism. And you notice that with a player like Kevin Durant as well, going on social media and kind of having the burner account. I don't know, is it something that you think it can actually be like a true problem for these guys in the locker room or with others if they are distracted by the outside noise that comes in?
Definitely. It absolutely is. Because even though LeBron puts on this facade that he doesn't care what the media says and he doesn't care what anybody thinks about him, he does. He even said it in his speech when they won. Give him his respect. He's constantly trying to prove himself and chase this. But I was thinking about it, and that's a disservice LeBron has for like when he's in the league compared to Jordan. Jordan didn't have social media.
No.
So he didn't have all that extra noise constantly in his head. I bet it would fuel him. It still fuels him. We saw it through The Last Dance. He still has so much to say about stuff that happened 20 years ago. Yeah. So I think it gets in your head. Even when you don't want it to get in your head, it's getting in your head. And I think, I don't know about Kevin Durant and his burner account. Like at some there's a level that we should take this, and fake accounts is not it, but whatever, KD, whatever you have time for. At least LeBron tries to show up and he proves it. He has his little slips sometimes where he says things where you're like, there's the difference in your mentality. I think about a couple years ago when they lost to the Warriors, and he made a comment which everyone in the sports psychology world was like, oh, there's a Freudian slip, because he was like, oh, we gave it everything that I had. We just ran out of talent. And I was like, but how, LeBron? You coached and handpicked the team. Like, that's not the way that you want to explain a loss, especially when you're trying to build that trust within your team. Or even little things with LeBron, I think is a big issue too, is like, not an issue, but it can impact it, is because he's been in the league so long and his team is so young, or was so young, especially last year, that these are people that looked up to him their whole lives, and now they're playing with him. So that level of when he shows like disapproval in something that they're doing is going to hit a lot harder than someone that's like your peer, because this was their idol. Yeah, and now he's showing, and now he's like, man, you sucked last night.
And they're going to take that to heart a little bit
exactly.
more.
So he has to lead that a little bit differently.
I think Kyle Kuzma is affected by that a lot, man. We've seen that a lot with him.
Well, even Rondo said it. He said he had to tell him, like, you got to watch your body language. They were talking about it when he walked off the court a couple of seconds early. Like, you got to watch your body language. You got to be careful of that, because they are taking it to heart a little bit more, because you're not just their teammate, you're their idol.
Yeah.
Man, that's true. And so I want to ask you a question, just based off your knowledge. Who's your GOAT right now? We talked about GOAT. All of us have kind of talked about GOAT a little bit. I want to hear who's your NBA GOAT right now.
In the league right now?
ever. NBA
All
GOAT.
time?
Yep.
Putting you on the spot.
I think
Nope.
for me, it's always going to be Kobe. I grew up watching Kobe. That's where my love for the game came. And it was this idea of just the way he could turn on like Mamba mentality when he started biting the jersey, and you could just be like, it's over. He's got this. It's been handled. I definitely think that's always going to be my GOAT. Jordan's great. Love Jordan. But I think the level of actually getting to watch it live is a little bit different. I mean, I was like 3 when Jordan won his last championship. So,
Hey, I'm not going to debate you. See the Kobe poster there in the back. I ain't going to debate you, man. I love Kobe too. And I think we've all expressed the love for Kobe, man. Ashley, man, really appreciate you coming on today and sharing that knowledge. And a lot of gems dropped today too. So
That was awesome.
tell the people where they can find you at for more information, or if they want to get in contact with you.
so AB Mentality on all social media. I even got TikTok finally because my
Hey,
host kept saying it was the next move.
for the AB mentality.
Right? Let's talk sports psychology in 15 seconds. So AB Mentality on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, or go to abmentality.com and they can send me a message straight from the website.
Well, Ashley Baskerville, thank you very much for coming on. Appreciate you. Much love. And make sure you stay tuned to Just Hoop Talk. We got more on the way. Subscribe on YouTube. Smash that subscribe button and show some love. Just Hoop Talk, another edition in the books. Well.
Peace.